need to expand. So you asked what makes a human being special, and I would say the human being, the capacity for conceptualization, the human capacity for long-range thinking, long-range planning, for rationality, the human capacity for freedom of choice. These things all make humans very different from animals. These are fundamental things that separate us even from our nearest relatives in the animal kingdom. I forget what the hell they are, bonobos, I think. But whatever they are, we are definitely distinct from them, which is why we have a different category that's called human beings. So some people would argue, it exists on a continuum. Well, that's fine, but there's clearly a distinction. I had to write a paper one time, and I wrote it on a book called The Lopsided Ape. And the book argued about the left hemisphere of the brain of humans was overdeveloped. And my ultimate answer to the person that assigned me the task, the professor, was that ultimately you're not asking an ape to write, you're not asking a gorilla or a chimp or a bonobo to write a paper on the difference between humans and the lower animals. You're asking a human because only a human can do it.
All right. Mark comes in with a big 20, and this will be the last one. Then we'll move into open panel. I do know that you are on limited time, Michael. Since rights are derived from reason, the mentally disabled are wards of those who have a rational faculty, like child's rights. Children are wards of their parents who are obligated to act in their interest.
Yeah, I would just continue to debate the first statement, right? Right. Since rights are derived from reason, there are people with reason who don't come to the conclusion of rights. And so it's just kind of like assuming the thing in question. Just saying rights are derivative of reason doesn't tell me why you can reject someone who uses reason to reject rights. It's just like, it's just starting with the conclusion, basically. But it's a $20 chat. So at least it was worth starting with the conclusion.
Well, Mark is a great guy. He's one of my closest friends on the planet. He's my co-chair of the American Capitalist Party. And he's a great guy. I wouldn't word it that way. I wouldn't say rights are derived from reason. I would put it at that rights are derived from the fact that man is a moral, rational being. It's a slight distinction. I don't know if we'd really disagree. He makes a point here that the mentally disabled are wards of those who have a rational faculty, like child rights. Children are wards of their parents who are obligated to act in their interest. I'm inclined to agree with that. It hasn't been proven to me yet. Not that it can't be, but it hasn't been. Again, I tend to focus my thinking on the things that affect my life, and I don't have children, so I don't spend a lot of time, and I don't have a disabled person that I'm taking care of. So that's why when you ask questions, well, I don't know. I have no problem when I don't know something. So Jim Bob said something, and we obviously can't get into the whole thing right now, but Jim Bob said, well, what if a rational person does this? Well, we'd end up arguing is it rational for the person to reject rights? And that, again, that comes down to epistemic justification, and it's a much broader discussion than we're capable of having in this format. Not that we couldn't debate that also. I'm just saying you can't debate that and rights and ethics all in one time. I can, and it'll exhaust me.
Fair enough. Gentlemen, I'm going to go ahead and open up the panel, and we'll start going from there. And I will prioritize questions to you, Michael, since you are. Okay, here we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Jim Bob just stepped away for a quick second. But we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and start with Ryan. Do you have a question for Michael?
Yeah, actually.
Oh,
So I haven't really learned a ton about like theory of rights. So I'm kind of just curious. Your explanation, I tuned into bits and pieces of the conversation. Your explanation seemed to align more with my intuition. So I just kind of wanted to pick your brain about it. Maybe you can flesh out what I'm understanding. So like
Sure.
the way my intuition works is that like there would be some ideological determination that people would come to about what rights should be enforced, and then there's the enforcement portion, and that's kind of like the breakdown of how these things that feels like the only way that this like makes sense in reality. So if you want to walk me through, I'm
Well,
sure I'm not using any of the formal terms to explain that.
If I understand you correctly, and if I don't, then just jump in and correct me. I'm fine. I've been wrong before. I may be wrong now, and I'm sure I'll be wrong in the future. But you said once it's ideologically determined, but that implies that it's entirely subjective, that people have agreed to it, and then the government protects them. My point or my position is that rights exist whether or not you agree to them or not. The idea is that you would come to agreement on the factual rights and then implement a government of some sort to protect those rights. It's a distinction. The distinction is only in the question that you asked, the way that you phrase it. It implied that it's these people getting together and agreeing to it that makes them rights.
So you're saying that when you say there's like an objective right outside of that determination, do you mean just like the individuals like coming from their value, or is there like something external that is
ultimately it's relational, right? Human beings are moral entities, but by the theory of morality that I'm arguing for, if you were alone, for instance, on an island, you would still have to make moral choices because you would still have to pursue values. You would still have to act to sustain yourself, right? Rights come into play once others come around. So if you are on this island, right, and you're living your life, you're gathering up, coconuts and water or whatever else you're gathering up, you're sustaining your life. Now we introduce his man Friday. He comes in. Now he can choose to punch you in the face, steal your stuff, rob you, kill you, or he can choose to trade with you or, whatever. Now the concept of rights comes into play because you have the right to do these things. And if he interferes with you, you have the right to self-defense. I hope that answers your question. If not, I would highly suggest, I think, 3 philosophers to read. I would read John Locke, Frederick Bastiat, and Ayn Rand on the subject of rights. They do a much better job than I do.
No, you killed it. You did.
Can I have a follow-up
very
question
well.
on that,
One
Michael?
more thing, and then I'll shut up.
Go ahead.
The last thing I'd say to that is the other thing I like that you said was about having I guess governments that enforce people's rights rather than like impose on those rights. And I think it's really important to uphold those like constitutional values and stuff, and not let like kings override judicial rulings and stuff. So I think I'm glad that we probably agree on that. So I appreciate that. But
Michael, I just want a follow-up question there. Is that
who's okay? I'm looking at Jim Bob.
Like they were basically like okay, we agree that if you aggress someone, they're already in the right to defend themselves with adequate force and you might die. But the aggressor knew that, and there was like an agreement that you all know that, but the aggressor wanted to risk it. Now, because the person being aggressed is in the right to defend themselves with whatever skill and weaponry they have, is it fair to say if they both knew the conditions, is it fair to say that if the aggressor had more force and they won, that they were just?
I don't understand what you mean.
Because a battle happened, right? So it's like, you aggress me, I'm going to aggress back. It's fair, okay? So, but if the aggressor wins and the agreement is, okay, it's aggressor versus defender, right? I'm going to use everything I got at you if you aggress me. And if you win, is it just if they win?
No,
Why
it's
not?
not just. It's not just for one, because they violated the rights of the person by initiating force against them. That's the first thing. But also, and there's a much broader thing, and this we'd have to really have a debate on ethics, because I specifically and intentionally didn't address this because it would take forever to really flesh out. But in the conceptual hierarchy, as you're forming concepts and coming to terms in your reasoning chain, what's the word I'm looking for here? The evil or the wrongness of initiating force actually comes before the concept of rights, because it applies to the individual's morality and what he should or shouldn't do. It just would take a very long time to elucidate that into.
See, I disagree. I think it's reversed, actually. I think it's the knowledge that if you use force, you can actually initiate a system of rights by force. Not that it's the other way. I think it's the other way around. I think that that rights are actually that are derivative of force, not force is derivative of rights. I think if you look at it actually historically, when a country says we have rights, they're actually using force to make a declarative statement that if you disagree with the declarative statement, you're going to be met with a war. That's what a war is.
Yeah. I don't disagree with the fact pattern of what countries actually do. What I disagree with is the evaluation that they would be just in doing so.
But in the instance where there's no government and it's just you in the woods, you're basically just descriptively saying whoever has adequate force wins. It's only until about an external
but that's factual.
Monopolized force actually acknowledges the rights, but acknowledging rights is force. It's literally force.
Well, there's force in self-defense and retaliatory in retaliation, and there's force that's initiated. And there's a big difference. Of rights
without force, though? Just tell me.
What do you mean? I don't understand.
What is acknowledging rights if you don't have force?
Well, if you don't have the proper force, you're in no position to defend rights. That's obvious. That's an obvious thing to say. It's obvious that it doesn't matter that I have a right. For instance, I would say I have a right against aggression. When I was incarcerated, the toughest, the most dangerous person, one of the most dangerous in the history of the prison system, came to me. And he said, Michael, could you help me with my anger? And I said, sure. I said, on one condition. He said, what? I said, well, when you're trying to work out your anger problems, we have to deal with some pretty touchy issues. I said, I need your word as a man that you're not going to hit me. Right? And he said, okay. He said, all right, Mike, I give you my word. I won't hit you. And he never did. I would argue I have a right not to be hit. If Fortune, that's the guy's name, if he chose to punch me in my face, there's nothing I could do. I mean, he would have destroyed me. He probably would have knocked me out in the first shot. He would have been violating my rights. But to your point, does it really matter if I can't defend it? No, it's still a rights violation. That's, in many ways why you need to have a collective self-defense to defend yourself against the fortunes of the world.
This is bar none the best breakdown of rights I've ever heard. I feel fortunate to fucking be here.
Who's that? I don't even know who's saying that.
Bottom left.
Hold on. So I know, Clay, your question's for Jim Bob, so I'm going to skip you for the moment. But Joe, I was actually going to push it over to you. Did you have a question for Michael?
I did not have a question, but I did want to say I feel fortunate, man. I run this around in my head all the time, and this is the clearest, best breakdown from Michael I'm talking about of rights, the way I perceive them ever. He did all the work for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you're stoned off your ass too. Make sure to take that into consideration.
He has a right to be.
I'm
not stoned, and I agree. Yeah,
I actually wrote a book where I talked about how I came to all my conclusions. If you go check it out, View from a Cage, my transformation from convict to crusader for liberty. I explained my entire intellectual development and how I came to the positions that I now hold.
Paul, I want to ask, do you have a question for Michael specifically?
I would say that my main concern is that I don't know where you're getting rights from. Like the title of the debate was, where do rights come from? I'm looking at it more from like a knowledge epistemological angle. So I'm thinking about it from a empiricist and rationalist standpoint. Where exactly do rights come from? What grants rights? And also, how do you determine what is a right and what isn't? Because you couldn't answer earlier, what if owning a gun, for instance, was a right, right?
Right. So before I answer the question, I just want to make clear, it's fairly are often fairly easy to identify a principle, right? An abstract idea that has to be applied practically. It's much more difficult to assess all the implications of that when you're taking action, all the practical implications. So I don't know all the practical implications of the rights theory, right? I don't know all of them. I couldn't know all of them. But you said, where do rights come from? And I've answered this question a few times. Rights stem from the fact that human beings are moral beings, that we're moral beings. And by moral beings, what I mean is we're people, we're entities that not only have to, not only can act to sustain ourselves, but we have to. Beyond that, we also have to choose to. Right. So the fact that we have to choose the values that we're going to pursue, and that these can either be beneficial or harmful to us, and the fact that we have to discover what's good, like we have to learn the vitamins that are good for us, the foods that are good for us. I have to learn that stuff in my face with chips and dip is not going to sustain me. That's what gives rise to the subject of morality.
Yeah, but Michael, you agreed.
Hold on, I'm answering this guy's question. Hold on, dude. You want to keep the debate going? I'm trying to answer his question.
The continuation. If it's the case that it's the moral thing to violate someone's rights,
it's not.
It's never the case to violate someone's rights.
It's never the case that it's moral.
Was it moral to take away your rights when you committed a crime?
You just made a distinction. You made a distinction between violating and taking away.
Is it moral to stop someone from self-deleting in the moment?
I actually got a question real quick.
What about this? What about Paul? Okay, Paul's asking the question.
Go ahead, Paul.
Is it moral to prevent somebody from suicide? No, it's not. It's that person's life. If that person wants to die, it's that person's right. Go ahead, Paul.
I would ask, when we're talking about determining rights and everything, how do you know when something becomes a right and when it isn't a right, such as the right to life or the right right to life, for example? How do we determine that's a right objectively, unless we're talking more like subjectively?
So once you elucidate that human being, remember what a right is. It's very important. And it's important to note that I did not create this definition. I did not, J.B. Pelletier, I do not think the good is illusory. So I don't know where you got that idea. But the concept of rights and the definition goes back centuries. It's not my creation, that it's a moral claim, right? You could go back all the way back to sophists who were discovering the difference between what was legislated and whether or not what was legislated is just or not. The ancient Stoics in Rome who were elucidating natural law, Cicero or Cicero, however you want to pronounce it. So the idea of rights, as I've defined it, defining natural rights, is not my invention. Right. So you have to understand that. So then what you have to ask yourself is, if there's such a thing as a moral being, right? Is a moral being entitled to certain things? And you have to ask yourself, well, what is that person entitled to? No, non-blood sport actually is just code to I don't like insults, and I don't like interruptions. No, but it's kind of fun to interact with them. So that's the question to ask. And the way that you would discover it is through observation and reason. You observe entities in reality. You observe that some entities are inanimate. You observe that some entities act. These are observations that you make. You observe that when entities act, some things are good for them, some things are bad for them. We observe that some entities are not able to make choices and other entities are. That's how you arrive at your whole idea of morality. That's how you arrive at your idea of what a person has a moral claim to.
How is self-deletion good for someone?
Doesn't that kind of seem subjective still, especially considering there's been so many conceptions of rights throughout different societies and everything like that?
Right.
We used to think like, what was that?
No. Well, you're going to invoke disagreement, and yes, people disagree, but people disagree about all kinds of things. It doesn't mean the fact is that people disagree when things are true and one person's right and the other person's wrong. So the fact that people disagree about it, Einstein disagreed vehemently with quantum mechanics, right? So in the quantum mechanics, professors, notably Niels Bohr, disagreed with Einstein. So does that mean that neither one of them's right? There's no truth to the matter because they happen to disagree? Of course not.
Well, I would say it would depend on how you can measure it, though, because we can't measure rights empirically speaking. It is just like some sort of abstract concept that we
Can you
determine
measure
on a
friendship?
societal.
Paul, can you measure friendship?
No.
Do you think friendship exists?
Exists in a physical sense or more in
No,
a abstract social construct sense?
It's a relational concept.
It's a
Right.
it's an agreement though, which is subjective from your own standards. So the whole point is, if you bring in friendship, you're actually not doing a service to your own argument, because you
sure
could just
I am,
say,
because the fact is these
hold
people
on,
are
let me talk.
friends.
Let me finish. Because you can just define a friendship. You couldn't say this type of relation is not a friendship, right? You couldn't ever tell someone that, right?
Sure, you could.
No,
Why
you couldn't.
couldn't you?
No, if
Friendship
someone had
means a
if someone
specific
had-
thing.
No,
Yes, it
Michael,
does.
if someone had a friendship and their standard or criteria for what is a friendship disagree with your standard, you couldn't tell them that they had a wrong friendship, right?
Say that again. I was reading.
If
the
someone had
chat, I'm sorry.
someone had a relationship with someone and their criteria for friendship didn't match your criteria, you couldn't tell them they were in
Hold on.
an incorrect friendship, right?
Jim Bob,
think in some cases
you are assuming in the very way you explain that what constitutes friendship is a matter of opinion.
A construct.
I'm
Yo,
saying
So you're
it's
saying
not.
right. So you agree rights are a construct. That's the end
Yo,
of the debate.
Michael, how
dude.
about this? Me and you are best friends. How can you refute that,
Chris.
Michael?
Because
Well,
I'm not.
I mean, I would even
Because
say,
I'm not your friend.
like that's
Well,
like when
how do you
someone.
know we're not friends? You would
Stop
have to
it, Chris.
define friendship.
Stop it, Chris.
What?
That
what?
would be like if I said, Jim Bob is my best friend. Like we are best friends, Jim Bob, 110%.
Mhm.
And Jim Bob's like everybody on panels like, is that true, Jim Bob? And Jim Bob's like, absolutely not. We're not friends at all. What is she crazy? Like obviously we both have a completely different set of standards for what friendship is,
And
right?
somebody's right and somebody's wrong.
How
Yeah, I
do you
think we would say
How
that
do
you
you
guys
How do you
know?
determine
You,
that?
yeah,
Well, I
you
think-
may not
Yeah,
be
they're
able
asking you for
to.
the threshold.
How do you
I think we
determine
would
that?
say-
No,
Go
let
ahead.
him answer. How do you
Yeah.
determine that?
Hold on.
I'm
When
trying to
you form a concept, and this goes back to the
You're not going to
epistemic
answer the question, dude. You're
justification.
going to do a
Okay,
long
dude, you are
history
dude,
Let him
can you-
answer. Let him answer.
it's absolutely ridiculous.
Let him
You ask
not
me a
answer.
question, I'm going to answer, and then you interrupt me, and then you say,
We
"Oh,
can
well,
all-
that's a
we
good
all
debate
know You're not going to
strategy."
answer, dude.
Well, you can't tell a goddamn thing. You don't know what you're talking about.
What was the question?
Let's be honest. The
Let's start with
question
the
is, how
question.
can you tell what a friendship is? That was the question.
No. How can you tell who's right or wrong between the two criteria?
And the way that you can tell is that friendship has been conceptualized a certain way, right? Either it's a
You
legitimate
know?
concept.
That's your
Hold on.
epistemic standard.
No,
You know?
hold on.
Bro.
Dude, can you shut the fuck up?
No, this is
Jesus
panel, dude.
Christ, dude.
His
Not gonna happen.
epistemic
No,
standard is
dude, no, that's not my. Listen, I'm not answering this question because
I
you
know
won't
you
let
can't
me.
answer the question. You gotta
How do you measure friendships?
Stop, Chris. I'm asking the
I
question.
measure friendship by not being a jackass who hides behind a puffy cloud. That's how I measure.
That's
I am a
Chris.
cloud,
He
bitch.
can't.
I'm a cloud.
He cams
You
up
fucking
all the
human.
time.
all the
He
time.
does.
All right,
Oh,
Chris,
boy.
that's enough. So I'm asking you the question. If I believe that Jim Bob is my best friend,
Yeah.
but he's telling everyone on this panel, like, no, the fuck we ain't, right? Like, who determines what that friendship actually is and who is right or wrong? Like,
Okay.
how would everyone sit
Let me
here
ask you:
and
is
make
friendship
that decision?
okay? It all is contingent on whether friendship is a legitimate concept or not. Is friendship a legitimate concept? Every concept has parameters. That's what a definition of a concept
But
does.
what if
It differentiates the
Ryan?
concept.
Well,
what
yeah,
if
it's subjective,
Ryan-
though.
Hold on. What if Ryan
Boost.
says, "I don't believe in friendship at all. I think it's just some made up thing that people say."
Okay, then Ryan is making a factual claim, right? Ryan is either right or wrong. It's not a matter of opinion. It's still Ryan might be correct in his observation that there's no such thing as friendship. Maybe
Okay,
friendship's
so
not a
what are the
legitimate
parameters
concept.
of friendship then?
Wait,
How do you
What are the
determine who's
parameters
right
of
or wrong?
friendship?
Sarah asked.
Exactly.
I want to
And
chime in
what-
since I got kind
You've
of
been
linked in.
named.
I feel like when it comes to the question of like the Sarah and Jim Bob example, I think there is an answer. Like I think most people would agree that if Sarah is saying, "Hey, Jim Bob's my best friend," and Jim Bob's like, "I don't fucking know this bitch," then Sarah's just wrong. Like that's not what friendship is. Like they're
That's not
friends. I
the
think
that's not the
we could-
hypothetical, because obviously I know
disagree that
Sarah.
they're not
No,
friends,
that's not
like
the
most people
hypothetical.
would. Sarah would just
Dude,
be
Ryan,
wrong. Yeah.
Ryan, don't be a sneak. I know it's in your nature to be a sneak, but we know each other.
Well, it's in your
So-
nature to be a retard, but
So
No,
it could.
yeah, that's not a
it
kind
could
dude.
be true.
answer the question, dude. Sarah made a very clear question, which really debunks the whole
Not a
thing. If
clear
you swap
answer.
friendship with rights, the point is, we're asking for how do you determine? You're just Ryan going, well, clearly most people agree.
No.
That's the answer.
This is how you determine anything.
Bruno.
Is it a legitimate concept? For instance, ghost is not a legitimate concept. It hasn't been conceptualized. It hasn't been observed. It hasn't been delimited. It hasn't been defined and distinguished from other concepts. It's illegitimate. So now we have to ask, is friendship a legitimate concept?
Hang on, wait. What?
This is the part y'all keep cutting them off at.
legitimate.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna
This is the important part.
We cut him off at the part where he doesn't answer the question.
no,
You just
because-
give him more time.
No, you
Well,
honestly,
David,
like
fine.
this is like
What-
this is
You're
like
not telling us the
ultimate
methodology, bro.
because you don't Jim Bob, in all fairness, you don't understand.
This message is sponsored in part by.
All right, gentlemen, the testosterone is strong here. All right,
is, but you know
Michael,
what?
It is
Michael,
now.
hold up, everyone.
I told you I had to leave
My-
at 10:30. So let's ask one question. I think Clay had a question, if I'm not mistaken, in the corner there. If
Clay had
somebody asked a
to
question.
Jim Bob.
For Jim
Okay.
Bob.
Well, I did ask a question, but
Yes.
the answer you're giving is just exemplifying something else.
No,
You're
it's
talking
not.
about a ghost.
The problem is what you want is a simple answer to a question that's not simple. And I can and I can't just say, oh, well, this is this. You, in order to say what is friendship, you have to understand the nature of concepts, the nature of concept formation. What is their basis? What's the difference between a legitimate concept and an illegitimate concept? And then you would get to say, okay, if friendship is a legitimate concept, it's necessarily delimited. Something that's infinity is not legitimate. So then you could not be wrong about it. If friendship's not a legitimate concept, then you say we're friends. He says we're not. Well, it's illegitimate. You're talking nonsense. But if friendship is legitimate, then it has to have parameters. And if it has parameters and you're not within those parameters, you're wrong.
I
So are they
totally
arbitrary
understand
parameters?
that.
Are they
Okay.
arbitrary parameters is the question.
They're arbitrary if they don't exist in reality. If they exist, if friendship, for instance, entails, let's just give a hypothetical. If friendship entails that every day on Tuesday that you say hi, Sarah, if that's how we conceptualize the thing, and then you don't say hi, Sarah, then
So you just
then
debunked
you're not
yourself.
within
If it's
friendship.
the
No,
case-
dude, do you know what debunk means?
Yes, you just
No,
said-
you don't.
You just
You
debunked
don't.
yourself.
Dude, you're an armchair
tell
philosopher
you.
who doesn't know what he's
I'll
talking
tell you.
about.
I'll tell you, Michael. I'll tell you how right now.
Sarah, where's Sarah? Because I have to go.
Where's
and I don't
Sarah?
want to be
Help me,
rude.
Sarah. Help me, Sarah. Let me tell you how, Michael.
No, I don't want Sarah to help me. I said I had to go at 10:30.
Okay,
You haven't debunked anything.
Michael,
you say
Michael,
debunk
let me-
over and
let me-
over and
let me
over
tell
again.
you.
No, I'm
Let me
not
tell-
going to let you
You're
spew
not going to let me.
bullshit
You're
at
not
me,
going to let
dude.
me correct you.
No,
Okay,
because you're saying nonsense.
You said there's a correct way between two friendship parameters to decide who's correct. Now the latest thing is you just arbitrarily define the parameters of what a friendship is.
no,
You just contradict yourself. Premise
no,
P1
I
is
didn't.
no first P is there's a
What is
correct
that music?
there's a correct type of friendship, right? You said that. There's a correct
No,
one.
I didn't say there's a correct type of
Yes, you
friendship. It's
did,
not
dude.
what-
You can go back. You said there's a correct one.
Dude,
Someone's
go
right.
back. I said there's a correct
someone's right.
concept of friendship.
You said
there's-
someone's right or
yes,
wrong.
Yes, someone's
That's
right
correct.
or wrong.
That means
If-
correct, dude.
Jim, if one person says we're friends and another person says we're not, and there's a concept of friendship that is delimited, which concepts must be, then somebody's
If
necessarily
they have
wrong.
two different criterias, how do you determine it? Right? You said, well, it depends on the parameters. If they have different parameters, that's the thing in question.
But then it's not a legitimate concept.
So then things that don't have parameters, like you can't tell me if someone should have the right to own a gun. That means by your own
No,
definition,
that doesn't
it's not
mean
a
there's
valid
not-
concept.
No, that doesn't mean there's not a
Yeah,
parameter.
you just
No.
debunked yourself again.
No, I didn't, dude. You really don't know what
You
debunk
just
means.
just
No, I
self-detonated,
didn't.
dude. You just
Dude,
your standard
dude,
for an
How old,
invalid.
Jim Bob? Seriously, how old are you? I gotta ask. You answer me.
Your
How old are you?
definition, what
Can you
standard is
answer
for
that
an invalid
question?
concept?
How
Dude,
old
this
are
isn't
you?
going to work on people.
No, I want to know. I'm
Just
not trying to
work
make it work. I want to know how old
Deflecting,
you
this
are.
is weak. This is
Jim,
weak.
Jim, it's not a
It's
deflection.
irrelevant. You're
It's not
you're
an
deflecting.
argument. Dude,
By your,
I agreed to a 2-hour debate, and
by
now
your
you want
own
to keep
standard,
hammering me with
rights are
questions.
not valid by your own standard.
Say it
Why?
again.
Because you can't tell me if someone should own a gun or not. That's one example where A doesn't equal A, where you can't define. If you can't define between the parameters or not,
Dude,
you just said it's an invalid concept.
hold on.
Therefore,
No,
rights are not valid.
No, this
Yeah.
is the problem is, and this is the inherent problem with this, is you think you're making sense, but you're not.
That's meta.
Right?
That's meta.
No.
That's a cope.
I don't care
Cope.
what it is. It's
Ask
the
Michael
truth.
Lebowski
Total
a
cope,
question.
man.
No, you can't ask me anything.
I just
Evan
wanna
had a
ask you-
question. Evan, did you want to go ahead and chime in with your question really quick?
All right. When it comes to like for rights and what is justified and what's unjustified, if a group of travelers are traveling in the mountains and they run out of food and another person passes by that's not in their group, can they go and they cannibalize that person because it's the only way they can survive? And is that moral to do?
Okay, so
Because that's the only thing that can
hold
keep
on.
them
So
alive.
okay, there's two separate questions. The first question is, would it be moral for them to do so? The second question is, does the other person have rights? Right? That there's two questions there. And this is what I would call a lifeboat scenario, right? So reality applies to the choices people make to the as they're living. They're talking about a scenario where basically they're deplete of choice. They're either going to die or cannibalize somebody, right? That's the scenario you're given. I would argue, and again, this is going to take us so far afield, which is why I hate these things, that morality actually doesn't even apply in such a situation, because you're not living in a situation, you're not describing a situation where people are actually making free choices about how to apply principles and values to their actions. You're talking about a situation where somebody's facing imminent death if
That's
they
not a
don't
free
do
choice
something.
to eat the person or not.
Okay. So is there another question that somebody has before I go?
Michael, may I please ask you a question? What's
No.
the difference between
No.
a friendship and an acquaintance?
Yeah,
What's the
I'm
difference
not.
between a
yeah,
friendship
I
and an
appreciate you, Michael. It
acquaintance?
was an interesting
I mean, that's a good question,
conversation.
honestly.
What's the difference between a friendship and an
Alright.
acquaintance?
Good
Chris.
question.
question.
Michael,
Hope you have a
just
good
one
night, man.
quick question. What differentiates
Who's this?
like
Who's this?
imminent survival
Evan.
me?
Go ahead.
What differentiates like an imminent survival situation and like their best possible future? Like they could steal like the resources of someone else to get the best possible life outcome for themselves. How is that different from like them surviving instead of
so-
dying?
The difference between the two, right, is when in the scenario where you're talking about, we're already living in a society and we're deciding, should we attack somebody? Should we kill somebody? Right. In this situation, we're living appropriately. If we're living by the human means of survival, reason, conceptualization, we're planning long-term. Right. We have to extrapolate from our observations, discover what's going to further our long-term interest, what's going to sustain us over decades. Right. So in that situation, you go and invade somebody, you're not doing that. Right. And I don't have time to get into all the reasons why you're not, but you can just look at war and you can see why ultimately war is destructive. People are dying on both sides, things of that nature. Right. In the other example, you're not talking about a situation where a person is conceptualizing their long-term survival. You're talking about a situation where somebody has to decide if they're going to survive for the next 5 minutes or they're going to die immediately. That's the difference. So I'm going to, I really do. It's 11 o'clock. I said I was only going to stay till 10:30 and somehow I've been manipulated to stay.
It's
I haven't really been manipulated. I haven't really
Michael,
been.
if you leave, we gotta beat up on Radical Coda.
It
Oh.
actually
And I
hasn't
will
been a
give you a
manipulation.
future reference for any future debates. I know I allowed a little wiggle room on the flex of time this round, but my usual start time is 9:15. I do
All right.
require 3 hours from my panelists so that we're not rushing open panel either. So that is the standard here. I did allow flex for this, but
Before
Thank
you
you,
leave,
appreciate
Michael,
it.
can you give me the name of that book again so I can type it in?
I actually have two books. The one book I wrote
Oh,
with
look at
Selman,
you.
the
I'm
first
sorry.
book. The first book is actually called "Down the Rabbit Hole: How the Culture of Corrections Encourages Crime." That doesn't deal with my political views. That's just a book
Well,
about correctional philosophy and what's wrong with what's wrong with prison.
Give me the other one.
The second book is View from a Cage: My Transformation from Convict to Crusader for Liberty. And I recommend everybody check out my podcast, The Rational Egoist. I've had many debates. They're not blood sport debates. They're just the regular, good old fashioned
quest
debate.
for truth.
They're very good. I've debated conservatives, libertarians, leftists. I debated the senior editor from Mother Jones magazine for God's sake. So you can check that out. And also everybody check out the Capitalist Corner, where every day, 9 Pacific, 12 Eastern, Mark Pellegrino and I host it. We discuss current events from a pro-capitalist point of view. And again, thanks everybody. I know we got a little rowdy here, but you guys love the rowdiness. I don't. I've had enough rowdy to last me a lifetime. I mean, I had rowdy before prison, 25 years of rowdy in prison. I just want peace. So this was probably peaceful for you guys. For me, it was extraordinarily rowdy. And Jim Bob, I apologize for telling you to shut the fuck up. That's not my way. That was a momentary laugh.
I can handle it.
No, I know you can, but it's really not about you. It's about me and how I want to behave. But otherwise, thanks everybody. Sarah, thank you very much for having me.
Be easy, pal.
Maybe I'll see you in the future. Take care, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Michael.
Bye,
Have
bye.
a wonderful evening.
Good
Hey, Kissy Cat came in with a big 20, says, stop being a cloudist, Michael. Let the puffy speak. But Powder Dusty comes in with another 20, says, puff and brick to the back. You both got shoved back there. Sorry, boys, you got 10 minutes back there, but I also have more people to bring on too. So you're back to the back of the line.
There's a dude who had a question for me. You disappeared.
That's one that got pushed to the back. Powder Dusty, I don't want to speed date. Can I hold? I'm gonna hold this. I'm gonna hold this speed date for a little bit later, just because the whole evening has just been shifted horribly, and I don't like it. So I'm holding it, Powder Dusty, just so we can actually get through the conversation for now, and then when things get out of hand, I'll go into a speed date. All right, let's see. Okay. I know some people had some questions for Jim Bob, so why don't we start doing that?
Yeah, I guess I do have. I mean, so I think I understand more or less where Michael was coming from and conceptualizing rights. What about you, Jim Bob? Can you give me like a quick summary to make
rights don't exist? Only force does.
Jim Bob, I had a question. I'm sorry.
Well, can I respond to that? Like, so people don't decide what rights to enforce?
No, what they decide is useless if there's no force.
But
Jim Bob,
I feel like that doesn't. Okay, I feel like that doesn't.
You're having trouble
freaking
internalizing
yeah,
words.
I'm having
What's
trouble
wrong with you? What's wrong with you?
But yeah, sure.
Okay, cool.
I guess you're.
What
yeah,
part don't you understand, Ryan?
Hey, Jim Bob.
The concept doesn't exist because another concept exists.
What?
Jim Bob.
Don't you understand, Ryan? We can do a training course right now, dude.
The rights as they are in a declaration. All right.
Ryan, I'll try not to be hostile, but
good luck.
If it's the case that rights, as you're describing, are simply a set of permitted behaviors and restricted behaviors that are met with force, what part don't you understand from my position that the only thing you're really talking about is an agreement for things, behaviors that are allowed or not allowed, met with force?
Well, I'm talking about the concept of that people would decide whether or not they want to enforce.
Yeah,
right?
I love that conversation. You know why? Because once you understand that the only thing in play is force, I'm not arguing that force might is right, like correct, but I am arguing that in an ordered society, you're going to need force and the threat of force to maintain order. So the only question from me, Ryan, ends up being whose ethical, metaethical, moral, epistemic system ought inform the use of force and the not use of force. I think that's a fair position.
Sure. Are you an American?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, in America, we would decide that based on the rule of law, like by the Constitution.
And the rule of law is totally upheld and defended by, drum roll, everyone, force.
Nobody.
Yeah.
What do you mean nobody?
But that
Well, I
doesn't
mean,
negate that we
No,
have
They
established.
threw law out the door a long time
That
ago.
wasn't counter my
Yeah,
position.
that just doesn't negate what I said at all.
Hey,
so,
Ryan, you think you
Fine.
can let me
Yeah, go ahead.
ask Jim Bob a question right quick? Look like you guys are going forever. Jim Bob, I'm gonna read a sentence here. You tell me what you think about it. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed with by their creator with certain inalienable rights. What
Who's
are
the
they?
creator?
What do you think they're talking about there?
That's ambiguous on purpose. First of all, nothing's self-evident. That's a nonsense machine position. That's enlightenment garble. Creator doesn't tell me who. I mean, if someone says the creator is actually Moloch, that's who's actually informing the Constitution. How are you going to
Do you have an answer for my question? What rights do you think they were talking about?
Rights don't exist. What they're
I
talking
didn't
about,
ask you if they exist. What rights do you think they were talking about? How did you think they had it? What were they
rights
thinking?
do you think they were talking about when they crafted that?
Yes.
I
What
think
do you think?
they were talking about the rights to pursue a life, some type of life, some type of dignified life.
All right.
It's totally ambiguous. Right? Look, I'll demonstrate that's ambiguous. The right to pursue happiness, dude. If it makes me happy to eat custard brains, suddenly I don't have the right to pursue my happiness, do I?
You don't. I don't know. What's a custard brain? Maybe I don't know what that is.
Jeffrey Dahmer. Do I have the right?
If it hurts someone else,
so it's
we can assume that you violated rights, right? I thought that's where they started at.
Who's the
you
God?
don't have the right to aggress against others.
I get it, but that's the thing is whose God determines the conditional.
Because one of the problems is that like Andrew, for example, thinks that like gay people getting married makes his marriage less valuable, which is a super weird thing to believe. Jim Bob probably believes this as well. So like I guess I understand why that.
I think you're lying. I don't think Andrew's
completely false.
He's tweeted that before. He absolutely has.
No, he's definitely not tweeted that.
That's not an Andrew position.
If you expand the definition of marriage to include all of these other aspects, right, or all of these other situations that aren't normally considered to be marriages, then it makes actual marriage less valuable.
Yeah, he doesn't affirm that it's
could be
possible.
Andrew.
Yeah. He doesn't affirm that it's possible for two gay dudes to get married.
He doesn't think it should be
legal,
right? He wants to eliminate their right to get married. Just like he wants to eliminate women's right to vote.
What gives you the right to get married? What are you talking about?
In America, gay people have the right to get married just like you do.
Do they not next month?
Yes, definitely that could happen. Yeah, especially because we have a king. We have a king right now who's overriding the judiciary branch.
That's great. How do you consummate a gay marriage, Ryan?
What? No, I didn't hear the question. What was it?
I said, how do you consummate a gay marriage, dude?
How do you consummate? They can.
I don't know. You get poop on your penis. You just get poop on your penis, and then you live out your marriage.
Yeah, because hetero people don't have
in with the big five. I believe this is over on Jim Bob's side. It says I may have. These are from earlier too. I'm going to start kind of rolling through them a few at a time here and there. I may have the right to send the super chat, but the funds, we'll see. If you can read this, then I guess I did. Thank you, Godzilla. Looks like it went through. Dustin Buckin with the big five duties. If rights, RIGHTS, don't exist, where do duties come from? Made by Jim Bob.
Duties? Yeah, you have to take a Christian, specifically an Orthodox Christian perspective for duties to make it coherent. So duties actually are grounded in your will and aligning your will. So it's an actual will, an active will to align your actions with something higher. Rights are a question of, can I have something? That's a recipient act. There's no action in asking for something. It's like, can I have something? A duty is an action towards something. That's the distinction that's really key. Now, coincidentally, if you abide by rights and you defend rights, you're still appealing to a duty, an active duty to defend rights. So where does that duty come from? So Dustin is a good question, because if you defend rights, you're actually arguing from a duty perspective anyway, because you have to argue, why ought we acknowledge rights? That's a duty. The right to have a gun doesn't tell you whether or not you have a duty to own a gun. The right to self-defense doesn't tell you whether or not you have a duty to defend yourself and your family. Everything points to Christian duties. Rights are some soft, broken enlightenment dipshittery that we're still in the fucking crop dust fart of right now. And it's been a horror show for the West, an absolute horror show.
Under
Well,
Ryan's
luckily we
definition of rights, that is true. It is given by man, and you keep asking man to give you a permission. You're
Right.
on the wrong route. They told you in the very first sentence, Declaration of Independence, I just read you, they come from God, which means, and they say among them, here are a few. They named a few, which means there are many more out there. And you exclude all them when you ask, when you beg
Who's
some guy to give you
who's
rights.
enforcing that then, though?
We exclude the first three as well. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness
Joe,
aren't rights.
Who is enforcing the
who's enforcing your
You have
God-given
to
right?
hold up. If you don't force them yourself, you don't have them.
Exactly. I'd have to enforce my own rights. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay,
now,
but
how
let's
now, like right
Yeah.
now within your society, how do you enforce yours aside from appealing to
Notice
the
people
government?
is the best way.
Well,
You need
I'm
to notice.
asking Joe.
my society
asking
has
Joe.
excluded any parts of the government for a long time. So what I do is I move around, get to know people, right? Politic, as we call it. And then that's how I move around and gain favor and make things happen in my world. That's how I survive.
You mean
So
wait?
you're
I just want
still
to
appealing.
summarize that. Do you mean
I'm still
to
appealing to but
force?
I don't have to outright ask. I can do things other people can't because I put myself in those situations.
Do you
And
have
I'm
a
not sure that
driver's
has
license?
anything to do with. Oh, I
So
do.
you
I
put
do.
yourself in
Now
a position to enact
I'm
higher
sorry.
force.
Now lately, the last 6 years and shit, I've been all up in the system. I got a credit card, all that square shit. To drive, yeah, all of that. So yeah, I fuck with the government now, but for years, no, that didn't even apply to me, man. I don't know. That's not what rights would have nothing to do with the government, right? That's nonsense. And because someone can take something from you, that didn't mean it was mine. I had a bike, someone stole it and took it from me. By your philosophy, that wasn't my bike anyway, because the
Well,
motherfucker
no,
had the
that's
authority
actually
to
It
take
means
very
it
it's
from
no
me.
good.
longer.
Very good, Joe. Guess what? Possession is basically the ability to defend what's in your proximity or in your possession with force, right?
Well, I love this. I think you're about to go to my definition of rights. So I think you're telling me that no man owns anything. Yeah.
That's right.
All right. So how is it that
Temporarily in possession, though.
excuse me?
Temporarily in possession.
I go for
Belong-
temporarily in possession of a thing. But if
Okay.
there's no ownership, you can certainly grasp the concept that no man gets to control you.
No man can. A man could actually restrict your ability to do things, but I agree on a metaphysical, spiritual level, they can't actually
Yes.
control you.
Yes. So you'd get the idea that rights can be given from that same sense. They can control them, taken away, but it doesn't mean they don't exist because someone has a bigger bomb. That just falls on
Well,
its
what is it?
face.
What is it,
Hang on.
Joe?
Are-
What
are
are you
we-
referring to that exists? Because the term exists, right? We can take a materialistic, an apple exists, right? And then we could take a metaphysical. I'm going to ask you, what are you referring to that exists other than Joe, which I think is much a stronger position? Your will exists, just your will.
Yes,
Why are you calling that a
I
right?
go. Yes, in the first sense, you said that a man can't take away your will.
Your
You use
will.
a different word, but yeah, your will. That's the same area, gray area where rights exist.
I
And he
understand.
was
Why do
yeah.
you need rights, Joe? The term rights, if you can just use will.
Because rights can let me harm another motherfucker. Rights can't.
Well, no. Rights can, your will allows you to act on messing someone up, violating someone else, acting
Right.
against someone, right?
Right.
The question is whether or not you were just in using your will. But, however, if you took on the approach, Joe, that you have
But will can hurt people. Rights
I
you're
understand,
not allowed.
Joe, just hold on a second. If you take on the view that you have a duty to not hurt people, you have a duty. It's not a right.
Yeah, I go
It's
for
not
it.
their
Yeah.
right. It's not their right. It's your will being controlled by your own will, like your action. Sorry, being controlled by your own will. You
Yeah, I
have
agree.
you're right. So isn't it the case that no matter what we talk about as far as action, the only important thing is whether or not your action is aligned with the will of something good or bad,
Of something.
regardless of rights.
There was that last sentence aligned with the will
only
of
thing we're-
something.
I'm saying the only thing we're actually ever talking about is whether or not your actions, your will, and your actions are aligned with something that you call the good or not.
Oh, I agree. This comes from a moral source. I'm okay with saying God, but nature could get you there. Harm no other man. You can be found in nature too.
Yeah, but the thing is, I'm saying is like people say I have the right to life. Okay, let's say I deleted you, Joe. Right?
Yeah.
Someone deleted you.
Mhm.
Did your life get eliminated, or did your right get eliminated?
Certainly not my rights.
Okay, they don't make a headstone for your rights, right?
Not that I'm aware of.
And they'll
I'm
say
not-
like Joe's rights gone. You know, he lived from whatever. You know,
I doubt it. They don't
1970.
even defend them on a daily basis in my
That's
life.
the
So
thing
no
is, like,
headstone. No.
Yeah, that's the thing is like the thing we're really pointing to. Like, if you took someone's life, you took their life. You didn't take their right to life because their life was taken. Like,
No,
there's
because right is not a thing that you can't be taken. It has nothing to do with whether it can be taken or
doesn't
not.
exist.
It can't be taken because it doesn't exist.
That's right.
Does
Can't
love
be because it doesn't
love exist?
Love, you can't. Yeah, that's not something you can.
Wait. It does exist.
Love is an action. Yeah.
Can you? What if I say I love you and you don't love me? Is that a thing?
What?
If I say I love Jim Bob, you say you don't love me. Who's right? Love can't exist. This is the philosophy you chose.
No,
earlier.
you're equivocating you're equivocating the definition of right and right.
No, I'm leaving. I'm trying to get him to understand that where rights exist in
That
the
actually
same place
proves my point,
love
Joe.
exists.
Joe,
You just said love exists, but you can't define it.
Joe,
Is
let me
love
answer.
two-sided though? Love's
Let me
not
answer.
two-sided.
Joe, let me answer. If you say love exists, it necessarily follows it has an objective standard that's not based in just you, right?
No, I don't think so. You
Okay,
think
so
there's
love
an
doesn't exist.
objective
It's
standard
subjective.
for
So the
love?
question is gone. Now that you
No. I'm asking. We stay with it. Question ain't gone nothing. Don't run. Are you saying love doesn't exist?
No, I'm saying.
All
I'm
right.
asking you, if
Tell
you
me if there's an objective standard. Please tell me what it is, and the rest
Look,
you tell me if you agree
Jesus
with this.
Christ, the second person of the Godhead, Logos incarnate.
I don't know what was that. Was that an answer to my
Jesus
question?
Christ,
Or you
the
reading
second
something on the
person of
bottom of the
Godhead
table?
is the incarnate, the epitome.
I don't even know her. Can you tell me what love is?
Jesus, you don't know who Jesus Christ is?
Christ is love, dude.
Oh, her name, girl. Jesus is a her. You could have said Jesus. So Jesus exists.
Yeah, Jesus exists.
So love is Jesus.
Jesus is the embodiment of love. If love, Joe, if love refers to being, a way of being, a way of acting, a way of existing, it necessarily follows that the only possible logical standard would be grounded in another being, an absolute being.
Well, I noticed that you haven't explained to me what the parameters of love are yet. And I bet you some people don't even believe in
I
Jesus.
literally just told you. You're the one arguing love doesn't exist, Joe. How is that
No,
going?
I know. We haven't even got to my opinion of whether love exists.
You're the one
I'm trying to
embodying
narrow
love,
down
Joe.
yours. I'm just asking the parameters. You said it must be definable. I am saying the definition of your love, Sarah's, and mine will not be the same no matter how you look at it, right?
Okay. Yeah,
but love still exists.
I understand. Joe, just say love exists is to appeal to a standard to say love exists, right?
Agree, but we can't define that standard.
Well,
Agreed?
I just defined it for you. The only
No. You said something about Jesus,
Yeah,
some
tell me your
convoluted
standard.
shit.
Let's compare standards, Joe. What's the standard for love, Joe?
I think it's subjective. You think it's
Oh,
objective.
you just said it doesn't exist then. That's a game over. Next person.
Oh my God. You with these lame ass victories. This just a run, Jim Bob, and you should run.
Hey, Joe, I'll push back on Joe a little bit.
Yeah, hold on. I want to, speaking of love, some super chats came in on Cash App. Mr. Harmon sends in the big 10 and says, Doris Day, look today. You have the it factor. Thank you, Harmon.
I told you look good today. In chat, you
Thank
might
you.
not have saw it.
Old Sarge Finkel in with the big 20 just to say yo. And then Wellum Manuel with the big 50 of something. I think it's 5 for us for the right to latch. Fair enough. And then chairman of the board says rights are located at the crest of the labia. Thank you for bringing us full circle round to full degeneration.
Just like your
over
chat,
here.
Sarah.
Yes. So who said they wanted to push back?
Yeah.
Oh, I want to push back on Joe a little bit. I just wanted to ask him a couple questions real quick.
I have some questions for Joe after
Joe,
that.
So
Go ahead,
Joe,
Brandon.
is love a right or is love an obligation?
I don't know. It's an obligation as far as I'm concerned. I don't. And is it a right? It will be a right as well.
So you have a right to love. What?
Yes.
Where does this right come from?
Uh, I think all rights. My own belief is God, or being, architect. I don't know what you call them, but you
Mhm.
can get there by nature. Don't harm
So then,
another man. What's good for the goose? Yeah.
gotcha. So if love is both a right and an obligation, would you also ground the obligation in God as well? You would say that you're obliged to love because
I,
of God.
I hadn't thought about it, but I think I would. Yeah.
Okay, so then rights and obligations are the same things.
Nah,
They're
I
not just
don't know what
entitlements,
that
acts, and
shit.
duties. You have an obligation, right? So you just cooked yourself again. Joe.
I'm not sure. Please explain. Don't assume a quick
So,
victory. Please
so
explain why there.
if you have,
Here's what
yeah,
I think
sure.
is going on. I think you're
No,
saying
I'm
that.
going to explain it to you.
Let me say this so you'll know
You
what
ask me to
the
explain it, I'll
rebuttal.
explain it to you, Joe.
I'll give
I'll
you a
be
moment.
super simple about it.
Here, this
I
will help
promise.
you.
You don't get to
I
explain.
think.
He just talks over you.
Yeah, I think that that you're saying that because the Corvette is a car, all cars are Corvettes. I think that's where you were
No,
going. So that's why I'm asking
No,
for clarity.
no,
no,
that's not what
no,
happened.
Joe. So look, I said, is love a right or an obligation? You said it's both, right? So when I asked you, love as a right, where does this right come from? You say God. When I say,
Yeah.
okay, well, love is an obligation, does this also come from God? You're saying yes.
Right.
Therefore, they're practically the same thing at this point. You're just saying
Not
that
really.
rights and
God gives a.
obligations are the same thing,
Okay,
right?
keep
But
going.
in the context of love, at least, right?
No, I'm just saying they both come from God. I'm not saying they're the same thing.
You said it's subjective and it comes from God. You just contradicted yourself. Is God subjective?
Oh my God. God gives me love, friendship, and all of
But
these
it's
things. Don't make
subjective.
them the
Great
same
work.
thing
Joe.
just because
Doesn't
they
answer
come
the
from God.
question,
I'm
dude.
not
Work,
going to agree
buddy.
with
You
you.
didn't
And
answer
to
the question.
anybody watching on the Raging Tomatoes side, if you're in my chat, please move over to the gauntlet. I have dropped the link into the chat and I'm going to go ahead and pin it. Head over there because I will shut down the show on the tomato side and you will no longer be able to watch or chat from that end. You can only do so on Gauntlet. Please do so now. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I think he was saying because rights come from God's and duties come from God, they must be the same thing. I don't agree with that.
No. So
Yeah,
I'll
it doesn't seem to
clarify it for
follow.
you. So, but essentially, what I'm trying to say is, right, is that if you're defining rights, or maybe I should ask for your definition of rights. I would assume you mean something like an entitlement absent duty, right? You're just
Uh,
granted this thing without having any duty
Not
to
just an
fulfill in order
entitlement.
to maintain it.
Where also you got to throw in that I can't infringe on another. That's where my rights end,
Right.
and another
Right.
guy can't
Sure.
infringe on
Well,
me.
we're not
Okay.
asking about where rights end. We're asking about what rights are. So if you're defining rights as an entitlement absent any duty or obligation, and you're saying that love is a right, an entitlement absent duty or obligation, which is grounded in
Wait.
God,
Is love? Let's
you're
see.
also
One step.
saying,
Is love?
and you're also saying that love is an obligation, and that obligation is grounded in God. How are they not
Love
just the
is.
same thing at this point? How is it? How is this not a contradiction? Actually, let's just you would either have to concede that love is or rights are ultimately an obligation, and you do have obligations, right?
But
Or you would
rights.
have to concede that love.
All right. Here, I'll
Sure,
tell you
go
where
ahead.
I stand. Rights. All of them are not duties. I have the right to help that old lady with her groceries. I have the right to do this because I'm not hurting anyone. But I don't have the obligation to do it. Okay, so the other
Under what framework?
under what framework? I can't help every motherfucker. I can't cure everybody and give water to every
Sure.
kid in the Sudan. I just can't afford it.
I can't help but think
Seems
we're
reasonable
majoring in the
from what you
minors
said.
here, rights
I'm
and
not.
love. And
Right? Oh,
define love first.
I don't think you can, which that's why I think is disingenuous to ask to define friendship and rights. These all are subjective, right?
And then
Wait,
Jim Bob,
friendship
you're
would just
talking
be an
about
interpersonal relationship between two individuals, right? That
Let's
is not
define truth
romantic.
then, Joe.
All right, maybe.
Bob, you're talking about God. Whose God are we talking about? The founders. Would you concede to the fact that they were talking about the God of Abraham and Isaac?
Generally, they're kind of deists a little bit. I would grant you that many of them took a slant toward like a modern heterodox position, yeah, of Christianity. But the thing is, they were ambiguous, though, weren't they?
Of course, but they had to be somewhat for the king's purposes, I think. But
Well,
what
yeah.
what do you What do you think about our government throwing us overboard? Could you define the moment when they did and when this happened? Because I mean, I don't think
Overboard?
we
What do
have.
you mean by that?
The government is now basically a corporation for profit, and we're just chattel property. I mean, that's happening.
Oh, you're taking the approach that they're corporated. There's the U.S. is some sort of company that's.
Well, it's split into two factions. It's both, basically, in essence. There's a private side and a public side where they're.
Yeah, I think that would be. I think capitalism without a Christian ethical paradigm. I'm not surprised where we are.
Yeah, it's
And
pretty crazy.
Do you think Trump's a
Justin
Christian?
Henley in with the Big Ten says, "Where's a right? A right is a fact and is not dependent on the government." That's not an answer, Sarah. Do better. I love how Justin calls me out for that. Chairman of the board says, "Rights sprout from the pubes of justice." Thank you again, Anson, for full degeneracy. Sarcastic Warlock says, with a big 5, Leibowitz, I can't say his fucking name, seems like the kind of
Leibowitz
guy who wants open borders. And then Felix with the big 5 says, rights as they are now are not the same rights they were 50 years ago, 200 years ago. If rights can change, they're subjective, not inherent. That's a very good point. And officially, I am shutting down the Raging Tomatoes side. Enjoy your raid over to the Gauntlet. Come over here to continue the show. Thank you. And gentlemen, back to you.
Yeah, I won't follow down this very long. I just one. I'm just curious, Jim Bob. Do you think that Donald Trump is a Christian?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I agree.
Can I just say something about the what Joe was saying earlier? When we're talking about he was talking about the Declaration of Independence. Michael is calling his view a teleological view, which I find kind of funny. He's not using teleological in the actual sense of teleological. And when we say, Jim Bob makes this point really well, I think. When we say teleological, we're saying an agent or a human being acts for an end. And what we mean is the human being has a nature that's ordered toward that end, right? An actual nature, not just, it's not grounded in autonomy. So rights in that context are moral claims derived from what's necessary for a human being to fulfill that end. And so you can say you're participating in real goods that are appropriate to the human end. Survival doesn't fit that. Survival, although it's good, it's an instrumental good, right? You're surviving for the purpose of something else.
Wouldn't survival be inevitably an instinct anyways, not necessarily like a...
Yeah, I think so. Or at least pragmatic.
At some threshold it would be, but then again, let's say it's your instinct to survive, and that's why Michael couldn't deal with the cannibalism question. That whoever brought that up, that was a great question, because you actually can demonstrate the ability to supersede and overcome your animal instincts to survive and do something horrific to survive. There's a moment where you actually make the choice and you say, will I eat my child? You know, your child passed away in the woods, right? And you're starving. Do I eat my child? That's a moral, you're going to make a moral choice, and you can't cop out and say, but I did it. I didn't have a choice. No, you always have a choice. You always have a choice.
So Joe, when we say that they're endowed by the creator, what we're saying is like the human being is naturally ordered toward truth, towards virtue,
yes,
community, right? Then you can say speech and things like that are could be rights in that sense. I mean, I don't like the order of rights. I like right order rather than rights, because rights has this concept of like
they can be given, taken away as something.
Well, like I like the concept of a right order, because modern accounts are going to treat rights as entitlements to pursue any end, whatever. Yeah. But what we're saying is no, humans have an end. Right, it's not you pursue any end whatsoever, and you'd call that teleological. So an example would be the right to religious liberty. It's not sacred because it protects autonomy or choice. What it's doing is protecting the soul's pursuit of the highest good. That's why it's right. Do you see the difference there?
All right, listen, you might have confused me a little bit. I've been saying you can get there through nature, but by your definition, I don't think soul can get to the highest good just by nature.
You can get there.
I think a God was just inserted in there a little bit.
You have to start with a nature that's oriented toward an end that is a good for that thing.
Yeah, but
what I'm saying. So you need capacities, dispositions, things like that, not just choice. Choice is not, and this is exactly what the late scholastic. Sorry, I won't go too deep down this road, but the late scholastics with medieval nominalism, they're changing from the concept of right order to subjective justice, to a subjective right. That gets carried into the Enlightenment. So there's a very big difference between being grounded in nature as in the sense of order toward an end versus
I dig it.
choosing an end.
Yeah.
All right. And just for the record, I still have backstage. I have Bricky Jones, also known, his screen name now says Clay Foundations. I've got Vibe hanging backstage. I've got Duck hanging backstage and Dustin Buck. If you want any of them up on stage, you know what to do. Chat. I don't care if it comes on my end or Jim Bob's end. And then Adolf says with the big 10, shit, Jim Bob, God bless you and everyone in chat. And Alter Void says, I get confused when I hear people say something like Joe said. He has a right to help people. Do you really have a right to help me if I refuse? Does my own rights not matter then?
No, yeah, his rights absolutely matter. And when my shit end, when I infringe upon your shit.
Jim
That's
Bob, when you
fair.
say rights, so sorry.
Go ahead.
When you say rights don't exist, are you speaking in terms of in society, basically? Because, like constitutional rights, we don't have rights. The Constitution is there to give us protections, not necessarily rights. Is that what you're
Rights.
referring to?
The way rights exist in a way that I'll agree they exist is a set of permitted behaviors and restricted behaviors from a force arm. That's it.
Right. Well, the way I
Behaviors
see it,
you can do and behaviors you can't do. And guess what? You can vote and suddenly the behaviors change and suddenly the rights change. So what you're really talking about is there a way you're allowed to behave? Yes. Is there a way you're not allowed to behave? Yes. Both of those are in the same folder, and the owner of that folder is a bunch of men with guns.
so I'm seeing it
So I
maybe
think
the same.
sorry.
Let me just finish this thought. I'm seeing it maybe the same, but
Yeah,
I think that to really have the full Monty on rights, it's
Mm.
in this society, it's something that you have to assert. Not only do you have to say it, but you actually have to put people on notice and say, look, this is how I operate, this is what I'm doing, or we don't interface.
Yeah, and that's by force. That's what I was trying to bring up with Michael, is that he was arguing, well, do what you will so long as you don't coerce people with a gun. And I'm saying the entire structure of rights, I'm not making an argument that it shouldn't be this way or whatever. I'm just saying the structure of rights is literally a coercive force that says there's a body of government that says we do things this way, right? We assume these things exist, and our assumption is backed with guns. And if you act against our assumptions, in reality, we're going to throw you in jail. That's literally backed with force.
By your definition, I see why y'all will bump heads, because he would have a different definition. It would be closer to those people acknowledging that we have rights, and if you violate these ones, we're going to force you to do so a thing that we have them already admits that we think they exist outside of us.
Yeah, but
God
Joe, I'm
gave
saying
us that.
Yeah, but
Under
Joe,
that definition, your
no, but
shit
even he's
doesn't
wrong.
hold.
He's wrong in that definition. Why? Because that's why I asked him the gun question. If I'm debating someone about the validity of rights, and their argument is that if you can't delineate between when you should have a right and shouldn't have a right, then it's not a valid concept. He did that with friendship, by the way. Now, reminder, he did that with guns. He couldn't tell you. He just refused to answer whether or not we have a right to own a gun. Joe, that points to...
I missed that part. I wasn't, but go ahead.
Yeah, but he did. He said, I don't know.
I believe
point
you.
is, the government can arbitrarily or be informed by the voters. Either way, it doesn't matter. They can determine at any point if you have the, quote, right to own a gun.
Under your definition, yes.
Under
Friendship. They can take away me and Sarah's friendship. They could make it so, listen, I can't call her on the phone. I can't do nothing out of confusion. They can physically separate us. Our friendship still exists because they took it away. It's still there.
But
They
my
took it.
love for you will still be strong. Allow me to interrupt because I have two boots I have to get out here. Old Sarge
All right.
Finkel sent in a big 20 to bring Clay Foundations back on. And in order to do so, he said to boot the Shade Master. Shade Master, you're going backstage. And then also Angry Beaver sent in 20 to bring Puffy back on. And he said to boot Osron. So Osron, you're going backstage, and then Puffy, come on back in. All right.
Hey Sarah,
Real
could I
quick,
ask could I do a quick internal critique on Joe, real quick, and then I will drop for someone else to come back up. That way I don't take too
Sure.
much time up on your panel.
No problem.
Joe, so you're saying that rights are absolute, and that you're not able to violate anyone else's rights,
Yeah,
given your own, right?
yeah.
Okay, so two questions. One's going to be a little bit different than the other, but I just want to get your understanding, and then maybe the panel can talk about it later.
Uh,
So if you saw someone, if you walked in, right, and you saw your son, let's just say that you have a grown son, right,
yeah,
and he has a firearm, and
right.
he's about to unalive himself, right? Would you say that you can violate his right to do what he wants with his own body?
I mean,
Would you say that you have the right or the obligation to violate his
I
autonomy,
I
to
don't
stop him
think
from
I
doing that?
do, but being a dad, I know what I would do. But if you're asking me the
Would you
moral
say that that
question,
would be
no, I
moral?
think that he is a separate individual. If he wants to end it, he made a decision. He came through me, but I don't own him. It is his decision.
So would you say you have an obligation to do it, whether or not you have the right, right? Would you say that you had an
Okay.
obligation, morally speaking, to save your son's life
It
by
it's
stopping him
it
from unaliving
certainly wouldn't
himself?
be moral. It would be selfish. It would not be moral.
It would be immoral to stop him
Well,
from
I don't know
unaliving
if it's
himself?
immoral. I don't know.
You just said it wouldn't. You just said it would be immoral, though.
It wouldn't be from a moral place, me stopping them. It would be selfish, from a selfish place. I'm not saying it's
So if your
immoral or
son,
moral.
so if your son was going through some period of psychosis in which he
You're
was not
adding
his normal
stuff.
thinking self, no,
Uh,
sure. I'm gonna see if it changes your answer at all, or whether or
it
not you're gonna be
will, if you're
consistent.
telling me he's going through it, has an ailment. Now I certainly am feel
Well, I
like
would argue anyone that's going to off themselves has an ailment. I would argue that they're
Protective
probably
now.
going through
You're
some sort of
invoking a
psychosis.
protective father, though.
I wouldn't follow
Sure.
that
Well,
argument.
right, but it's just about the consistency of his logic here in regards to
Right, right.
Well,
obligations
But
so
and
I
rights.
can engage with this a little bit.
I think you're
I
saying
can
if
bridge this maybe.
the ailment that you're saying, I think, I don't know, it's fucking up his thinking process. I thought that's where you were
Right.
going.
I mean, well, anyone that's going to off themselves is obviously not
That's
thinking
your
correctly,
opinion.
right?
That is not necessarily true. No.
Yeah,
They're obviously
I
going
was
to
going
be
to
in a
say
state
earlier
in which
when
they want
this
to
question
unalive
came up,
themselves,
real
which is
quick.
quite
Then I'm going to
natural
help.
psychology.
Right. Like I think it's important to note that like most people when they come to they decide to do that, they are in a like a moment of extreme psychosis or
I
they're in a
agree.
moment of really elevated emotion. But that doesn't mean that every single person who's reaching that decision is always in that extreme emotional state. And I
I
think
think
it's
so.
important to make the distinction.
I
But I
think
mean,
so.
yeah, I
Well,
think
if you well, if you think
99.9%
so,
of situations. But I think
Joe, if
that
you're saying
Brandon's
that you think all of those people
universalizing it is
would,
a mistake. Yeah.
It's a
yeah,
bad
I would
mistake.
universalize it because I would say that they have severe spiritual ailments as well as probably
Yeah, that's fine.
mental due
You
to
can
a
say that
spiritual.
out. That's
But
fine.
regardless,
I'm okay with you
Joe,
saying that.
I'm just trying to get you to be consistent on the logic of whether or not you have an obligation. Let's say that he does. Your son does, in fact, have some sort of psychological issue in which he wants to unalive himself. Do you have an obligation as a father to step in and violate his bodily autonomy
And you have to have a
because of the fact
million
that he is
more.
in this situation?
You'd have to have a million more details on me. If you're asking me, do I have an obligation? Now
No
it
problem.
becomes moral. I'd have to have a lot of shit like
Well, you already.
how much he's
No problem.
deteriorated, what's making him deteriorated, how his faculties could he arrive at, and
Right.
it'd have
Yeah,
a
you're
bunch
not
of
going to be able to
factors.
assess all that. You walk in and you see him about to blow his own shit back.
I'd
Are you
stop
going to
him. I
save him or
told
not?
you that through the gate. If you're asking me whether I have the moral and the duties and responsibilities and stuff, that's a larger question. I would stop him. I would stop you.
Yeah,
All right, no
exactly.
problem.
I'd stop
I
you,
appreciate it,
Brandon.
Joe. I just wanted to
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah, yeah, I
yeah,
love
no
it. I
problem.
love it. I love
Yeah,
it.
and then
Yeah.
hopefully the panel can deal with it after I leave. But Sarah, yeah, if you want to kick me and bring another up, by all means. Thank you
Sure,
for having
sure.
me.
And feel free to hang backstage too, because people get booted all the
Yeah,
time. If you have more to add in as well. Thank you for
for
volunteering,
sure.
even though I would
Absolutely.
prefer the grift. Vibe, Vibe is coming up now, and then we also have Duck and Dustin Buck, both back to back in a row. It's quite strange. Hanging out. Ray says with the big 5, opinion doesn't matter. Okay, I guess I'll stop watching then. Rude Mud Crab says with a big 5, the only rights you have is to attempt to impose your will and to attempt
Oh,
stopping will imposed on you.
Damn, dude.
Smalls says, "Look at that mouth." I'm not sure whose mouth he's referring to.
I hope it's the ghost.
What
Hope
that
it's
mouth do?
not. Well,
What that mouth do?
these were from earlier. I'm going through all of the earlier super chats that we couldn't get through. Did I read this one yet? I don't think I did. Sarcastic Warlock with the Big 10. The rights a man arrogates to himself are related to the duties he imposes upon himself. The great majority of men have no right to exist, but are a misfortune to higher men. Niche. Any thoughts?
I didn't get that last part, and I don't want to zoom in.
Niche. Well,
Okay.
I'll say, speaking of higher men, I'm going to yield to Duck because I was mainly here to learn. I don't have like super strong opinions about the nature of rights and stuff, so I'm gonna let Duck take my place. I think he'll be better suited for this. So take care, everyone. Have a good night.
In my opinion, it's not defined enough. I really have a problem with not defining terms. A lot of times this happens. Actually, Jim Bob and I probably had a great chat in the back. I'm hoping.
Clay, how did you like Michael's definition of the right term? And just to remind you, Clay, if you weren't here, he said a moral claim.
Unfortunately, that's just not quite good enough.
Right.
Yeah. No, because rights are a concept. That's just plain and simple, right?
Not really.
Privileges are a concept. Thoughts are a concept. All of these things are ideas. Okay?
You could have just said no to Jim Bob's question, but
yeah, I could have. You're right. Would you like
Can I ask Jim Bob a question?
Oh, Cloudy.
Go ahead, Chris.
yeah, I mean, Jim Bob arguably had
I'm not that queer with the curly mustache, Sarah. Damn it. I'm a clown. Jim Bob.
Yeah.
Don't people have the right to their religion?
Not really.
Definitely not.
I mean, you can't take it away, can you?
Well, you can't take their beliefs inside of their head away. So in that case, they have the